They looked at her and saw a victim. They should have looked closer. When Liam Blackwood filed for divorce, he thought he had committed the perfect crime. He had the high-priced lawyers, the hidden offshore accounts, and a prenup ironclad enough to leave his wife, Vivian, on the street. He spent 10 years treating her like a decorative object, silent, obedient, and powerless. He thought she was just a small-town girl lucky to have married a CEO. But Liam made one fatal calculation. He never bothered to ask who Vivian's family really was. And by the time they walked into that courtroom, it was already too late for him to run. The end of the marriage didn't start with a scream. It started with the click of a Mont Blanc pen against a mahogany table. It was October 14th, 2023. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse on 57th Street, Manhattan was being battered by autumn rain. Inside, the air was climate-controlled, scented with expensive leather and the distinct metallic smell of betrayal. Liam Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood and Sterling Capital, sat at the head of the dining table. He didn't look up from his phone as he slid a manila envelope across the polished wood toward his wife, Vivian. "It's standard, Vivian," Liam said, his voice bored. "Irreconcilable differences. I've been generous. You get the condo in Jersey, the 2018 Rover, and a monthly stipend for 2 years. After that, you're on your own." Vivian stared at the envelope. She was 34, but in that moment she looked much younger, wrapped in a beige cardigan that Liam had once called frumpy. For 10 years she had played the role he cast her in, the quiet, supportive wife who organized charity galas, managed the household staff, and never asked questions about late nights or business trips to the Caymans. "Divorce?" she whispered, her hands trembling just enough to satisfy Liam's ego. "Don't make a scene," Liam snapped, finally looking at her. His eyes were cold, the eyes of a man who had negotiated billion-dollar mergers and crushed competitors for sport. "I'm in love with someone else, someone who matches my trajectory." He didn't need to say her name. Vivian knew. It was Chloe de Winters, the 26-year-old PR director for his firm, the woman who had been helping Liam with his image for the last 18 months. Vivian had seen the texts pop up on the iPad linked to his cloud account 6 months ago. She hadn't said a word. "And the kids?" Vivian asked, her voice steadying slightly. "Boarding school in Switzerland is already arranged for next term. I'll take custody during holidays. You'll get visitation rights, contingent on your living situation." He checked his Rolex. "Look, sign the papers." Jeffrey Sterling drew them up. "You know you can't beat Jeffrey. If you fight this, I will activate the infidelity clause in the prenup." "I haven't been unfaithful," Vivian said, genuinely confused. Liam smirked, a cruel, thin expression. "I have photos of you having lunch with your tennis instructor. Innocent? Maybe. But Jeffrey can make it look like a sordid affair in court. You'll get nothing. Take the deal, Vivian. Go back to whatever dusty town in Virginia I plucked you from." He stood up, adjusting his suit jacket. "I'm staying at the Four Seasons. Have your things out by Friday." He walked out. The heavy front door slammed, echoing through the empty, multi-million-dollar apartment. Vivian sat in silence for a long time. The trembling in her hands stopped abruptly. She reached for the glass of water in front of her and took a calm sip. Liam Blackwood prided himself on due diligence. He knew every weakness of every company he acquired. But in his arrogance, he had made a classic narcissist's error. He assumed that because Vivian was quiet, she was simple. He believed the story she had told him 10 years ago, that she was the daughter of a retired history teacher and a librarian from a small town near Roanoke, Virginia. Technically, that was true. Her father did teach history after he retired. Her mother did volunteer at the library. But Liam never asked what her father did before he retired. He never asked about her mother's maiden name. He never asked why Vivian, despite having no apparent income, always seemed to know exactly how to navigate high society etiquette without flinching. Vivian pulled her phone from her pocket. It wasn't the iPhone Liam paid for. It was a prepaid burner she kept taped under the drawer of her vanity. She dialed a number she hadn't called in 4 years. "Hello?" A gruff voice answered on the second ring. "Dad," Vivian said, her voice dropping the meek, fearful tone she used with Liam. "It's done. He served the papers. He's trying to cut me out completely and send the boys to Switzerland." There was a pause on the line. A heavy, dangerous silence. "Did he threaten you?" "Yes. He threatened to frame me for infidelity to void the prenup." The man on the other end let out a low, dry chuckle that sounded like gravel grinding together. "Liam Blackwood thinks he's a shark because he swims in a pool. He has no idea what's waiting in the ocean. I need the team, Dad. All of them. I'll have the jet in Teterboro by midnight. Pack light, Vivian. It's time to remind Mr. Blackwood that the history teacher used to run the Southern District of New York." 3 weeks later, the atmosphere in the waiting area of the New York State Supreme Court was suffocating. Liam Blackwood sat on a leather bench, checking his stock portfolio. Beside him was Jeffrey Sterling, New York's most notorious divorce attorney. Sterling was a man who charged $1,500 an hour to destroy lives. He wore a pinstripe suit that cost more than most cars, and had a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "She's late," Liam muttered, annoyed. "Typical. Probably couldn't figure out the subway." "Relax, Rick," Sterling said, smoothing his silk tie. "We're just here to formalize the temporary orders. She probably got a legal aid lawyer or some strip mall attorney. We'll bury them in paperwork within the hour. You'll be at lunch with Chloe by 1 p.m. Liam laughed. "She actually tried to tell me she wanted to negotiate the custody arrangement. Can you believe the nerve?" "Desperation," Sterling dismissed. "They always try to fight at the beginning. Then they see the legal fees and fold." Just then, the elevator doors at the end of the hall chimed. "Here comes the circus," Liam sneered. But when the doors opened, it wasn't Vivian looking disheveled and weeping. First, 2 men in dark, tailored suits stepped out. They weren't lawyers. They moved with the alert, scanning precision of private security. They held the doors open. Then, Vivian stepped out. Liam blinked. The beige cardigan was gone. Vivian was wearing a structured navy power suit, tailored to perfection. Her hair, usually pulled back in a messy bun, was blown out straight and sharp. She wore oversized sunglasses and carried a Birkin bag. Not one Liam had bought her. But it was the entourage behind her that made Jeffrey Sterling freeze mid-laugh. Walking to Vivian's right was a man Liam didn't recognize. A tall, broad-shouldered man in his late 30s with a scar running through his eyebrow, carrying a heavy briefcase. Walking to her left was an older man. He used a cane, but he moved with the momentum of a freight train. He wore a 3-piece charcoal suit that looked old-fashioned, but terrified Sterling. "Who the hell are they?" Liam whispered. Sterling's face had gone pale. He grabbed Liam's arm, his grip surprisingly tight. "Rick, shut up." "What?" "That's Arthur Harrington," Sterling hissed. "Who cares? Is that her dad?" "You idiot," Sterling whispered harshly. "Arthur Harrington isn't just a history teacher. He was the federal prosecutor for the Southern District in the 90s. He put half the mob in prison. He's known as the Hangman. And the guy next to him? That's his son, Michael Harrington. He's not a lawyer. He's the head forensic accountant for the IRS's Major Crimes Division." Liam felt a cold drop of sweat slide down his back. "You said her family was poor." "I said you told me they were poor," Sterling snapped, losing his cool composure. Vivian and her team stopped 10 feet away. Vivian lowered her sunglasses. Her eyes were clear and hard. "Hello, Liam," she said. Her voice wasn't soft anymore. It carried in the marble hallway. "Vivian, what is this?" Liam tried to bluster, standing up to use his height advantage. "Bringing your daddy to court. It's pathetic." Arthur Harrington stepped forward. He didn't shout. He spoke in a low, resonant baritone that echoed in the quiet corridor. "Mr. Blackwood," Arthur said, "you have spent 10 years underestimating my daughter. You assumed that her silence was submission. You are about to learn that it was merely data collection." "We're going to crush you," Liam spat, though his voice wavered. "I have the prenup." Michael, the brother, smirked. He dropped the heavy briefcase onto the bench. It landed with a thud that sounded like a gunshot. "The prenup," Michael said, "lists your assets at approximately $40 million. Which is interesting, Rick. Can I call you Rick? Because my preliminary audit of your shell companies in the British Virgin Islands suggests you're actually worth closer to $200 million. Hiding assets in a divorce proceeding? That's perjury and fraud." Sterling stepped in, trying to salvage the situation. "Allegations, nothing more. We will see you inside." "Oh, we're not just going inside for the divorce," Arthur said calmly. "We're also here to discuss the SEC filing regarding Blackwood and Sterling's manipulation of the tech venture IPO last spring." Liam felt the blood drain from his face. That was a secret. A deep, dark secret that only he and 2 other people knew. "How?" Liam stammered. Vivian stepped closer to her husband, close enough that he could smell her perfume, a scent he realized he hadn't noticed in years. "I organized your office, Liam," she whispered. "I shredded your documents. Did you really think I didn't read them first?" She turned to her father. "Shall we, Dad?" "After you, Counselor," Arthur said. Liam watched them walk toward the courtroom doors. "Counselor?" Liam asked, looking at Sterling. Why did he call her Counselor? Sterling looked like he was going to be sick. He pulled out his phone and frantically typed a name into the Bar Association database. "Oh my God," Sterling muttered. "What?" "Vivian," Sterling read from his screen, his voice trembling. "Vivian Harrington, Yale Law, class of 2013, top 5%. She passed the bar in New York and Virginia, but never practiced, officially." Liam stared at the closed courtroom doors. The woman he thought was a simple, powerless housewife had a law degree from Yale, a father who was a legendary prosecutor, and a brother who hunted financial criminals for a living. And he had just served her divorce papers based on lies. "Fix this, Jeffrey," Liam growled, panic finally setting in. "I can't fix this, Rick," Sterling said, closing his briefcase. "I can only try to keep you out of jail. We need to settle. Now." "No," Liam said, his narcissism fighting his fear. "She's bluffing. She hasn't worked a day in her life. She can't beat me in court." Liam pushed past his lawyer and shoved the courtroom doors open. He was ready for a fight, but as he walked down the aisle, he saw Vivian sitting at the plaintiff's table. She wasn't sitting with the nervous posture of a jilted wife. She was organizing files with the distinct, rhythmic efficiency of a predator preparing to eat. She looked up at him and smiled. It was the last time Liam Blackwood would ever see her smile. The judge entered, Honorable Judge Myra Kincaid, a tough, no-nonsense judge known for hating arrogant finance types. "Docket number 49201, the bailiff announced. "Blackwood versus Blackwood." "Appearances," Judge Kincaid said, looking over her glasses. "Jeffrey Sterling for the plaintiff, Liam Blackwood," Sterling said, his voice unusually subdued. "Vivian Harrington, representing the defendant, Vivian Blackwood," Vivian said, standing tall, "and appearing pro hac vice with me, Arthur Harrington." The judge's eyebrows shot up. "The Arthur Harrington?" Arthur stood and bowed his head slightly. "Good morning, Your Honor." "Well," Judge Kincaid said, looking from Liam's sweating face to Vivian's icy composure. This just became interesting. Vivian picked up the first document from her stack. "Your Honor, before we discuss the dissolution of marriage, the defense moves to freeze all assets belonging to Mr. Blackwood, including the 3 accounts he attempted to liquidate at 4 a.m. this morning under the alias Redbird Holdings." Liam froze. He had done that on an encrypted laptop in the bathroom. Vivian turned to him, her eyes locking onto his. "Game on, Liam." The courtroom air was stagnant, recycled, and heavy with the scent of floor wax and anxious perspiration. Judge Myra Kincaid sat high on her bench, her expression unreadable, though her eyes darted frequently to the stack of financial documents Vivian Harrington had just slapped onto the table. Liam shifted in his seat. The wood of the chair felt harder than it had 10 minutes ago. He leaned toward Jeffrey Sterling. "Why isn't she sitting down?" Liam whispered, the vibration of his voice betraying a tremor he couldn't suppress. She made her motion. "She should sit down." "She's grandstanding," Sterling whispered back, though he was frantically tapping on his tablet, trying to access the offshore accounts Vivian had mentioned. His screen flashed red. "Access denied. Administrative lock." "Mr. Sterling," Judge Kincaid's voice cut through the whispers, "your client filed the initial petition for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. But you've indicated an intention to enforce a prenup based on an infidelity clause. Is that correct?" Sterling stood up, buttoning his jacket with a confidence he no longer felt. "Yes, Your Honor. The prenuptial agreement signed in 2013 is explicit. If Ms. Harrington, engaged in extramarital relations, all claim to spousal support and asset division is voided. We are prepared to present evidence." "Proceed," the judge said, leaning back. Sterling motioned to his paralegal, who handed a thick binder to the bailiff. "Your Honor," Sterling began, finding his rhythm, "we have surveillance photographs taken over a period of 3 months. They show the defendant in compromised proximity with her tennis instructor, a Mr. Mark Solomon. Long lunches, intimate conversations in her car, and entry into his private residence." Liam smirked. This was it. The kill shot. He looked at Vivian, expecting to see shame. Instead, Vivian was looking at her fingernails. She looked bored. When Sterling finished his presentation, he sat down, looking smug. "The defense rests on the motion to dismiss alimony." "Ms. Harrington?" the judge asked. Vivian stood up slowly. She didn't look at the judge immediately. She turned her body fully toward Liam. For a terrifying 10 seconds, she just looked at him, analyzing him like a specimen in a jar. "Mr. Sterling," Vivian said, her voice deceptively light, "did you or your client perform a background check on Mr. Mark Solomon?" Sterling frowned. "Relevant personal checks were made, yes." "Did those checks include his marriage license?" Liam scoffed loud enough for the court reporter to look up. "He's a tennis pro, Vivian. He's not married." Vivian picked up a single sheet of paper from her file. "Actually, Liam, Mark has been married for 6 years." She turned to the judge. "Your Honor, Defense Exhibit A, a marriage certificate from the state of Massachusetts, dated June 2017, between Mr. Mark Solomon and Mr. David Ross." Silence descended on the courtroom. It was absolute. "Mr. Solomon," Vivian continued, her voice hardening, "is a gay man. He is also my confidant. the intimate conversations inside his home that Liam's private investigator captured. "We were planning a surprise anniversary party for you, Liam, for our 10th anniversary. The one you missed because you were on a business trip in Aspen." Liam felt the blood drain from his face. He remembered the trip. He hadn't been in Aspen. He had been in Miami with Chloe. "The accusation of infidelity with Mr. Solomon is not only false," Vivian said, walking toward the bench. "It is a deliberate fabrication, designed to defraud this court." "Objection!" Sterling shouted, leaping up. "Relevance!" "Overruled," Judge Kincaid snapped. "Sit down, Mr. Sterling. I want to hear this." Vivian turned back to Liam. She walked until she was standing directly in front of the plaintiff's table. She placed her hands on the edge of his desk, leaning in. "Since we are discussing infidelity, Liam," she said softly, "let's discuss the consulting fees listed in your monthly expenses." She signaled to her brother, Michael. Michael Harrington stood up. He didn't look like a lawyer. He looked like a hunter. He projected a spreadsheet onto the courtroom screen. "Your Honor," Michael said, his voice grating and deep. "My team analyzed the cash flow from Mr. Blackwood's personal checking account, the one he didn't think was linked to the cloud. Over the last 18 months, there have been 42 transfers totaling $150,000 to an account held by CDPR Solutions." Michael clicked a button. The screen changed to a corporate registry document. "CDPR Solutions is a sole proprietorship registered to a Miss Chloe de Winters," Michael read. "The address listed is an apartment in Tribeca. An apartment, incidentally, that was purchased by a shell company owned by Blackwood and Sterling Capital." Vivian picked up the narrative. "Chloe de Winters is your mistress, Liam. But you didn't just sleep with her. You used marital funds, my money, our children's money, to pay for her lifestyle. In the state of New York, that is called wasteful dissipation of marital assets." She turned to the judge. "We are countersuing for divorce on the grounds of adultery and cruel and inhumane treatment. And because Mr. Blackwood attempted to defraud the court with the fake infidelity claim against me, we move to void the prenup entirely." Liam couldn't breathe. The room was spinning. He looked at Sterling, pleading for a lifeline. Sterling looked horrified. He was staring at the screen where the transfers to Chloe were highlighted in neon yellow. "Jeffrey?" Liam choked out. Sterling closed his eyes for a brief second, then looked at the judge. "Your Honor, we request a recess to review this new evidence." Judge Kincaid looked at Liam with pure disdain. "Request granted," she said, banging the gavel with a force that made Liam jump. "You have 1 hour, and Mr. Blackwood, if you move 1 cent from any account while you are on break, I will have you remanded to custody faster than you can blink. Court is in recess." The gavel strike echoed like a gunshot. Vivian didn't look back as she gathered her files. Her father, Arthur, stood and placed a hand on her shoulder. It was a heavy, grounding touch. "Good start," Arthur rumbled. "It's not over," Vivian replied, her eyes fixed on the exit. "He's going to panic now, and panicked animals bite." The recess was supposed to be an hour, but the war had already spilled out of the courtroom. Liam didn't stay in the courthouse. He needed air. He needed to scream. He pushed through the heavy oak doors, flanked by Sterling, expecting the usual anonymity of the mid-morning city. He was wrong. A wall of camera flashes blinded him the moment he stepped onto the granite steps of the Supreme Court. Reporters swarmed like locusts. "Mr. Blackwood, is it true you embezzled funds to pay off a mistress? Liam, comment on the SEC investigation. Are you stepping down as CEO?" Liam shielded his eyes, stumbling back. "No comment. Get them away from me." Sterling was shoving a microphone away. "Who called them? This was a closed docket. Liam looked down the steps. Standing near a black SUV, perfectly poised, was Vivian. She wasn't answering questions. She was simply standing there, wearing her sunglasses, letting the image speak for itself. The dignified wife versus the sweating, panicked husband. She had leaked it. Or her brother had. "Get me to the car," Liam hissed at his security detail. They bundled him into the back of his Maybach. The leather seats, usually a source of comfort, felt like a coffin. "To the office," Liam barked. "Rick," Sterling warned from the seat beside him. "Maybe you should go to the hotel. The optics—" "I need to control the narrative," Liam screamed, slamming his fist into the door panel. "If the board hears about the asset freeze before I tell them, I'm dead." The car tore through traffic toward Wall Street. Liam pulled out his phone to call Chloe. "User busy." He called again. "User busy. Damn it, Chloe," he muttered. He opened his texts. "Liam, don't talk to anyone. Legal issue. I'll fix it." The message was marked, "Read," but there was no reply. A knot of true fear tightened in his stomach. Chloe wasn't the type to be silent. She was the type to run. The car screeched to a halt in front of the Blackwood and Sterling Tower. Liam stormed into the lobby, ignoring the startled greetings of the reception staff. He bypassed the security turnstiles and jammed the button for the private elevator. When the doors opened on the 40th floor, the silence was wrong. Usually, the trading floor buzzes with aggressive energy. Today it was hushed. People were huddled in groups, whispering. As Liam walked past, they scattered, burying their heads in their monitors. He threw open the double-glass doors to his office. Sitting in his chair, behind his desk, was a man he didn't expect. It was Elias Vance, the chairman of the board. Elias was 70, a man of old money and ruthless pragmatism. He was reading a document, Vivian's document. "Elias," Liam said, stopping short. "I can explain. It's a messy divorce. She's flinging mud." Elias didn't look up immediately. He slowly turned the page. "Mud washes off, Liam," Elias said, his voice devoid of warmth. "Forensic audits do not." Elias dropped the document on the desk. It was the affidavit Michael Harrington had presented in court regarding the shell companies. "You used company infrastructure to hide personal assets," Elias said, finally looking up. His eyes were like flint. "That pierces the corporate veil. You've exposed the entire firm to liability. The partners have been blowing up my phone for the last 20 minutes. The stock is down 4% since the news broke on Twitter." "It's a lie," Liam insisted, walking further into the room. "Her brother is a glorified accountant. He's guessing." "Her brother," Elias interrupted, "is the man who brought down the cartel's banking division in 19. If Michael Harrington says the money is there, the money is there." Elias stood up. He walked to the window, looking out over the city Liam thought he owned. "The board is convening an emergency meeting at 2 p.m., Elias said. "I'll be there," Liam said, straightening his tie. "I'll handle them." "No, you won't," Elias said softly. "You're suspended, effective immediately, pending an internal investigation." "You can't do that. I built this firm." "And you're destroying it for a piece of tail," Elias roared, losing his composure for the first time. "Get out, Liam. Security will escort you. Leave your phone and laptop. This is my company. Not anymore. Check the morals clause in your contract. The one you insisted we put in for junior partners. 2 security guards. Men Liam had hired, men whose Christmas bonuses he signed, stepped into the doorway. They looked apologetic but firm. "Mr. Blackwood," one said. "Please." Liam looked at Elias, then at the guards. He realized with a sickening lurch that he had no allies left in this building. The power he thought was his was merely leased, and the lease had just expired. He turned and walked out. He didn't take his laptop. He didn't take his framed awards. He walked to the elevator, the eyes of his employees burning into his back. Out on the street, it was raining again. Liam stood under the awning, feeling stripped naked. His assets were frozen. His job was gone. His reputation was bleeding out on social media. He hailed a taxi, a humiliation in itself, and gave the address for the apartment in Tribeca. Chloe's apartment. He needed a win. He needed someone on his side. Chloe would understand. They would go to the Caymans, wait this out. He still had cash stashed in the safe there. He used his key to open the door of the loft. "Chloe," he called out. "Babe, pack a bag. We need to leave." The apartment was chaos. Drawers were pulled open, clothes scattered on the floor. Chloe was in the bedroom, struggling to zip a massive Louis Vuitton suitcase. She looked up, startled. She wasn't wearing the lingerie she usually wore for him. She was in sweats and sneakers. "What are you doing?" Liam asked. "Leaving," Chloe said, hauling the suitcase off the bed. "I saw the news, Liam. They froze the accounts." "It's temporary. I'll fix it." "You can't fix the IRS," she snapped. "My cousin works at Treasury. He called me 10 minutes ago. He said your name is flagged on a federal watch list. Do you know what that means? It means they're coming for everything." She pushed past him into the living room. "Chloe, wait." Liam grabbed her arm. "I love you. We're in this together." She laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound. She yanked her arm away. "Together?" she sneered. "Liam, I was with you because you were a winner. You were the CEO. Now? You're a liability. I'm 26. I'm not going to prison for being your accessory." "I bought you this apartment," Liam shouted, his desperation turning to rage. "And Vivian's lawyers will take it back by Monday," Chloe said, opening the front door. "Goodbye, Liam. Don't call me. I deleted everything." The door slammed. Liam Blackwood stood alone in the apartment he had paid for, surrounded by the remnants of a life that was disintegrating by the second. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, hoping for a miracle. It was a text from an unknown number. "Meet us at the St. Regis, room 404. We have a settlement offer." "Vivian." Liam stared at the screen. A settlement. A way out. He didn't feel relief. He felt a creeping dread. Because if he knew Vivian, if he knew the woman he had ignored for a decade, she wasn't offering him a parachute. She was offering him a blindfold. He walked out into the rain. He had no choice. He had to go to the St. Regis. He had to face the family he had provoked. The shark was bleeding in the water, and the minnows had become piranhas. Room 404 at the St. Regis was a suite, decorated in muted creams and golds, smelling faintly of lilies and old money. It was a space designed for comfort, but to Liam Blackwood, it felt like a holding cell. He knocked. The door was opened, not by Vivian, but by Michael. The large man didn't say a word. He simply stepped aside, leaving enough space for Liam to squeeze through. Inside, the suite was quiet. Arthur Harrington sat in a wing-back chair by the window, sipping black coffee, his cane resting against his knee. He didn't stand up. He didn't even look at Liam. He just watched the rain falling on Fifth Avenue. Vivian was sitting on the sofa. She had changed out of her power suit into a simple white blouse and dark trousers. She looked comfortable, relaxed. She was pouring tea from a silver pot. "Sit down, Liam," she said. It wasn't a command. It was an invitation, which somehow made it worse. Liam sat in the chair opposite her. He tried to muster some of his old bravado, but his suit was damp from the rain, and his hands were shaking. "I spoke to Elias," Liam said, his voice raspy. "He's overreacting. Once I clear up this misunderstanding about the accounts—" "There is no misunderstanding," Vivian interrupted gently. She placed a teacup in front of him. Drink. You look pale. Liam stared at the tea. I don't want your tea, Vivian. I want to know what you want. You said settlement. So let's talk numbers. I can give you 5 million. Cash. I have it in a... We know about the Cayman safe deposit box, Liam, Michael said from the corner of the room. And the crypto wallet on the hard drive in your golf bag. We seized those assets an hour ago via a court order in the British Virgin Islands. Liam felt the air leave his lungs. That's illegal. You can't touch offshore. We can when we prove the funds are proceeds of a federal crime, Arthur said from the window. He finally turned his head. His eyes were heavy, tired, and incredibly sharp. Securities fraud, wire fraud, money laundering. You didn't just hide money from your wife, son. You stole it from your investors. Liam gripped the arms of the chair. I want my lawyer. Where is Sterling? Jeffrey isn't coming, Vivian said. She picked up a folder from the coffee table and opened it. Jeffrey is currently at the district attorney's office. He's cutting a deal to save his law license. He's giving them everything, Liam. Every email you sent him asking how to hide assets. Every conversation about the IPO manipulation. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Liam looked at the three of them. He realized for the first time the sheer scale of the trap he had walked into. Why? Liam whispered. He looked at Vivian. Why are you doing this? I was a good provider. I gave you a life most women dream of. Just because I fell out of love? Just because I wanted to be happy? Vivian set her cup down. The china clinked softly. You think this is about Chloe? Vivian asked. A small, sad smile touched her lips. Liam, I knew about your affairs 3 years ago. I knew about the receptionist in 2019. I knew about the flight attendant in 2021. Then why didn't you leave? Liam snapped. If you're so smart, why did you stay? Because of the boys, she said. Her voice dropped, becoming fierce and low. Because I saw how you looked at them. You didn't see them as children. You saw them as extensions of your ego. You wanted to mold them into little versions of yourself. Cruel, empty, obsessed with status. I stayed to be the shield. I stayed to make sure they knew what empathy felt like. She leaned forward. And I stayed because I needed time. I needed to wait until you made a mistake big enough to ensure that when I did leave, you would never be able to touch them again. Liam laughed bitterly. You think a judge will keep me from my sons? I'm their father. You're a felon in waiting, Michael corrected. Vivian slid a single piece of paper across the table. It wasn't a legal document. It was a letter. This is the settlement, Liam, she said. Liam picked it up. His eyes scanned the text. 1. Liam Blackwood grants full legal and physical custody of Thomas and James Blackwood to Vivian Harrington. 2. Liam Blackwood waives all parental rights. 3. Liam Blackwood confesses to the SEC violations regarding the tech venture IPO. You want me to go to jail? Liam looked up, appalled. You want me to confess? You're going to jail regardless, Arthur said, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. The FBI is already building the indictment. The only choice you have now is how you go. Vivian softened her tone, leaning in closer. If you sign this, Liam, I will ask the prosecutors for leniency. I will tell them you cooperated. You might get 3 years in a minimum security facility. You'll get out. You can start over. And if I don't? Vivian's eyes went cold. If you don't, Michael hands over the other drive, the one with the evidence of you laundering money for the cartel contacts you met in Mexico last year. Liam froze. He thought that was buried deep, buried so deep no one could ever find it. That, Liam stammered, that wasn't me. I didn't know who they were. Ignorance isn't a defense when you accepted the wire transfer, Michael said. If that comes out, you don't go to Club Fed. You go to maximum security for 20 years, and you will die there. Vivian watched him. She saw the calculation happening behind his eyes. The narcissist was weighing his survival. "Sign the papers, Liam," she whispered. "Save yourself. Give me the boys and you can keep your life." Liam looked at the pen she offered. It was a Mont Blanc, the same brand he had used to sign the divorce papers that started this war. He picked it up. His hand trembled violently. He looked at Vivian one last time, searching for a trace of the submissive wife he had known. She was gone. In her place was a woman made of steel and patience. He signed. The moment the ink dried, the atmosphere in the room shifted. It wasn't a celebration. It was a dismissal. "Michael," Vivian said, taking the document, "file this with the court immediately." "Done," Michael said, snapping a photo of the signature and hitting send on his phone. "You can go now, Liam," Vivian said, not looking up as she organized the papers. Liam stood up. He felt lightheaded. He had just signed away his children and his freedom for a promise of leniency. He walked toward the door, his legs feeling like lead. "Vivian," he said, pausing with his hand on the brass knob. "Yes?" "Did you ever love me?" Vivian stopped what she was doing. She looked at the man she had spent a decade with. He looked smaller now. The expensive suit didn't fit right. The arrogance had been drained out, leaving a hollow shell. "I loved the man I thought you were," she said quietly. "I loved the man who took me to that diner in Virginia and talked about building something real. But that man died a long time ago, Liam. Or maybe he never existed." Liam opened the mouth to speak, to defend himself, but found he had no words left. He opened the door and walked out into the corridor. The hallway was empty. He walked to the elevator and pressed the button. When the doors opened, he expected to just go down to the lobby and find a drink. Instead, 2 men in windbreakers were waiting inside the elevator. They wore earpieces. Liam stopped. He knew that look. "Liam Blackwood?" one of the men asked. "Yes?" "Special Agent Miller, FBI," the man said, flashing a badge. "We have a warrant for your arrest." Liam stepped back, panic flaring. "Wait! I made a deal. I just signed a confession. She said she would ask for leniency." "We're aware of your cooperation with Miss Harrington," the agent said, stepping out and grabbing Liam's wrist. He spun him around, clicking handcuffs onto his wrists. The metal was cold and tight. "That cooperation is why we're allowing you to self-surrender quietly instead of raiding your hotel room. But you still have to come in." "This is a mistake," Liam cried out as they marched him toward the service elevator. "I need to call my lawyer." "Mr. Sterling is already in custody, sir," the agent said blandly. "He's been chatting with us all morning." Liam was led through the service exit of the St. Regis, out into the rainy alleyway, where an unmarked sedan was waiting. There were no paparazzi this time, no cameras to document his fall, just the grey, weeping sky and the smell of garbage. As the car pulled away, Liam looked up at the hotel. He counted the floors. The 4th floor. He imagined Vivian up there. Was she celebrating? Was she laughing? Up in room 404, there was no laughter. Vivian stood by the window, watching the black sedan merge into traffic. She felt a profound exhaustion settle into her bones. Her father, Arthur, came up beside her and placed a hand on her back. "It's done," Arthur said softly. "He looked so pathetic," Vivian whispered. "He used to be a giant to me. I used to be terrified of his mood swings. I used to walk on eggshells." Fear relies on perspective, Arthur said. When you stand up, the monsters look a lot like men. Michael was on the phone in the background. Yes, confirm the wire transfer. The trust fund for the boys is secure. We're moving the remaining assets into the escrow account as agreed by the settlement. He hung up and walked over to them. The boys are safe, Michael said. The school in Switzerland has been notified that Liam has no visitation rights. I hired a private security detail to stay near the campus for the next 6 months, just in case he tries anything stupid out on bail. He won't, Vivian said, turning away from the window. He's broken. Liam only fights when he thinks he can win. When he knows he's beaten, he collapses. She walked over to the mirror, hanging in the hallway. She looked at herself. She saw the lines of stress around her eyes, but she also saw a spark that had been missing for years. "What now?" Vivian asked, looking at her reflection. "Now?" Arthur smiled, a genuine warm smile that transformed his stern face. "Now you go back to Virginia for a few weeks. Mum is making pot roast. The garden needs tending. You breathe, Vivian. You haven't exhaled in 10 years. And the law license?" she asked, touching the reflection of her Yale class ring. "The firm has an empty office," Arthur said. Harrington and Associates could use a partner who knows how to take down a shark." Vivian smiled. It wasn't the polite, submissive smile of Mrs. Blackwood. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. "I think I'd like that," she said. She picked up her bag. She didn't look back at the room. She didn't look back at the city that had been her prison. She walked out the door, and for the first time in her life, she was walking toward something, not running away. 6 months later, the winter sun over Manhattan was brittle and cold, casting long, sharp shadows across the concrete canyons of the financial district. Inside the federal district court, the air was warm, but for Liam Blackwood, it felt freezing. He stood before Judge Kincaid, not in his bespoke Italian suit, but in a standard-issue orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. He had lost 20 pounds. His hair, once impeccably dyed and styled, was showing aggressive streaks of grey at the temples. The courtroom was packed. The fall of Blackwood and Sterling had been the financial scandal of the year. The press was there, hungry for the final headline. "Liam Blackwood," Judge Kincaid said, her voice echoing with the finality of a slamming door. "You have pleaded guilty to 3 counts of securities fraud and 1 count of wire fraud. You betrayed your investors, your company, and the public trust." Liam looked down at his hands. He was shaking, a tremor that had started the day of his arrest and never really stopped. He looked toward the back of the courtroom, scanning the gallery. He was looking for her. He needed to see her one last time. He needed her to see him, to acknowledge that he still existed. But the seat reserved for victims and family was empty. Vivian wasn't there. "In light of your cooperation with the investigation," the judge continued, "and the restitution made to the victims via the asset forfeiture, I am sentencing you to 60 months in a federal correctional facility, followed by 3 years of supervised release." 5 years. It was a light sentence compared to what he could have gotten, but to Liam, it sounded like a lifetime. 5 years of irrelevance. 5 years of being a nobody. As the bailiffs moved in to handcuff him, Liam turned desperately to his court-appointed lawyer, a young, overworked public defender who clearly despised him. "Is she coming?" Liam asked, his voice cracking. "Did Vivian send a letter? Anything?" The lawyer closed his briefcase, not making eye contact. "Miss Harrington sent nothing, Mr. Blackwood. She made it clear that her involvement ended the moment the settlement was signed. Move along." Liam was led out the side door. The flashbulbs popped through the small window, capturing the image of a broken king. 300 miles away, in the rolling green hills outside of Roanoke, Virginia, the air smelled of damp earth and pine needles. It was a stark contrast to the sterile, recycled air of the courtroom. Vivian Harrington sat on the front porch of her parents' farmhouse. She was wrapped in a thick wool blanket, watching her 2 sons, Thomas and James, chasing a golden retriever through the frost-covered grass. They were laughing, a loud, uninhibited sound she hadn't heard in the penthouse. There, they were always told to be quiet, to not disturb their father, to behave like miniature adults. Here, they were just boys. The screen door creaked open behind her. Her father, Arthur, stepped out, holding 2 mugs of steaming cider. He walked with his cane, but his steps were firm. "It's on the news," Arthur said quietly, handing her a mug. 5 years. Vivian took the cider, wrapping her hands around the warmth. She watched the steam rise into the cold air. She felt nothing. No joy, no vindictiveness, no sorrow, just a profound, quiet peace. "It seems appropriate," she said softly. "Chloe de Winters gave an interview to Vanity Fair," Arthur added, sitting in the rocking chair beside her. "Tried to paint herself as a victim of his manipulation. The public didn't buy it. She's working retail in Queens now. No firm will touch her." Vivian took a sip of the cider. "I don't care about them, Dad. I really don't. They feel like characters in a book I read a long time ago." She looked out at the boys. "I was so afraid for so long. I thought I was weak because I stayed. I thought I was stupid because I let him treat me that way." "You were never weak, Vivian," Arthur said, his voice gruff with emotion. "You were gathering strength. You were observing. Strategy isn't about the loudest shout. It's about the longest wait." A car pulled up the long gravel driveway. It was a black sedan, sleek and professional. Michael got out of the driver's seat. He was wearing a suit, but he had lost the severe, aggressive look he wore in New York. He looked relaxed. He waved at the boys, who ran over to tackle their uncle. Michael walked up the porch steps, pulling a thick file folder from his briefcase. "The final trust fund documents," Michael said, handing them to Vivian. "The boys are set for life. Education, housing, everything. Liam's assets covered it all, with enough left over for your new venture." Vivian ran her hand over the file. "And the office space?" "Leased," Michael grinned. "Harrington and Harrington is officially open for business. Main Street, right next to the courthouse. I already have 3 clients lined up, all women going through high-conflict divorces with narcissistic spouses. They heard about what you did to Blackwood. They want the giant killer." Vivian smiled. It wasn't the shy smile of the past, nor the predatory smile of the courtroom. It was the smile of a woman who knew exactly who she was. "I'm not a giant killer," she said, standing up and brushing the blanket off her lap. She looked at her father, then at her brother. "I'm just a lawyer who did her homework." She walked down the steps to join her sons. The wind caught her hair, blowing it back from her face. She didn't look back at the house, or check her phone, or worry about what Liam was doing in his cell. Liam Blackwood had underestimated his wife because he looked at her silence and saw emptiness. He never realized that silence is where the storm gathers. And now, while he sat in a cage of his own making, Vivian was finally, truly free. The sun broke through the winter clouds, bathing the Virginia hills in golden light. Vivian laughed as her son threw a football toward her. She caught it. The game was over. She had won. And that is the story of how Liam Blackwood learned the hardest lesson of his life. Never mistake silence for weakness. He thought he had married a simple, small-town girl who would fade into the background. He spent 10 years building a fortress of lies, convinced he was untouchable. But he forgot that the strongest structures aren't built on money or ego. They are built on family, loyalty, and truth. Vivian didn't need to scream to be heard. She just needed the right moment, the right team, and the courage to finally stand up. In the end, Liam lost his fortune, his freedom, and his family, all because he never bothered to ask who his wife really was. It's a powerful reminder to all of us. Treat people with respect, not because of who they know, but because of who they are. You never know who is sitting across the table from you, or what they might be capable of when pushed too far. I hope you enjoyed this story of justice served cold. If you felt that satisfaction when Vivian walked into the courtroom, hit that like button right now. It really helps the channel grow. What would you have done if you were in Vivian's shoes? Would you have taken the settlement, or would you have sent him to prison for longer? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you want more stories about karma, revenge, and turning the tables, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss a video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.